still watching Nigeria Decides on Plus TV Africa, and we're moving on in our conversation for today. And we'll be focusing on the plight of persons with disability in Nigeria, their rights, and some of the things that we've observed regarding the involvement of persons with disability in politics. We're going to take it all the way.
And definitely we have to look at all of these pertinent issues, because if we are going to we're counting down to the elections, we have to have a government that believes in inclusion, most definitely.
Absolutely.
And to discuss all of these matters and more, we have David Anyaele, the convener of the Coalition of Disability Organization, as well as Femi Gbadebo, who is also the founder of Benola Cerebral Palsy Initiative. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the first question is this. Not so many people are well educated or informed when we say persons with disabilities, and being able to differentiate that with people with special needs. Now, Mr. Gbadebo, can you just take us through this?
Well, the question I would ask is there really a difference? We're talking about semantics here. Man likes to look at himself as being normal, and then some other people as either not being normal or be less than normal. And it comes from the perception that because they are unable to do certain things, then it makes them either not normal or abnormal. But they've been created in certain ways. So one that cannot see, that cannot hear, that has missing limbs, that has a disability that makes them maybe a little bit unsightly, and all that is considered disabled. As time went on, the issues of handicap, of limitations, and all those things started to come on. And at some stage, you know, you'll find people started to kick, don't call me disabled, don't call me limited, don't call me handicapped. And so it started to come on. And then when you look at, there are some groups called invisible disabilities.
Exactly.
You have, you know, asthma, high blood pressure, diabetes. These things limit you not all the time, but it limits your ability to do certain things. You're too tall, you're too short, you're too fat, you're too slim. They're all problems. So then, you know, it started to come that, look, we must look for a word that encompasses all of them. And that's where persons with disabilities comes in. It tries to cover everybody. And if we use the term widely, you'll be surprised to find that just about everybody fits in there.
Most definitely.
Well, let's hear your thoughts as well, Mr. Femi.
That's David.
Mr. David Anyaele.
Okay, thank you so much. Just as you rightly said, it's about semantics. The people that use special needs are people who are in the educational sector. These are the terminologies they use to define people with disabilities. So in the educational sector, they classify them as, you know, special needs children or otherwise. But globally, we have persons with disabilities. There is a convention called UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. The convention defines who is a person with disability. And it went further to say that anybody who has sensory or physical impairments that hinder the individuals from participating on equal basis with others is classified as a person with disability. So sensory impairments are not visible, as well as, you know, mental, you know, health impairment. They are not visible. They are not physical. You cannot feel it. But when it has to do with sensory impairments goes into two different ways. That is to say, it may be sight impairment or hearing impairment, which is sensory. Then when we talk about physical impairment, which has to do with people who are physically challenged by reason of amputation or spinal cord injured or other forms of physical disability that hinders the individual from participating on equal basis with other members of the society. So in as much as you have different form of disability that may disturb you, but if it does not hinder you from participating on equal basis with others, then a doctor is in a better position to classify you, you know, with a person with disability or otherwise. Other than that, anybody can come up and say, oh, I have a financial impairment, I have a, education impairment, and he can equally classify himself as disability because is a disability, inability to do one of the, but it does not hinder him or her from participating in the basis with others.
From your explanation now, this also tallies with the World Health Organization classification, which was made in 2001, which says, well, persons with disabilities, we categorize those who have mobility or physical impairment, spinal cord disability, head injuries, brain disability, either acquired or traumatic. We also have the vision impairment, hearing disability, cognitive or learning disabilities as well. And then psychological disorders, persons who have personality disorder and other mental illnesses. Now, these vary because somebody who is visually impaired, the needs are totally different from somebody who can't hear properly or who can't easily move. But the stigma at the end of the day is the same. We find out that when somebody has cancer, for example, everybody runs to that person and say, oh, I hope you're feeling fine, let's attend to you and all of those. But when you hear of persons with disability, the approach is totally different. Why? What informed this whole culture where we respond to conditions that are of concern and we just respond totally differently with stigmatization, with marginalization, and a whole lot of negativity? When we have these numbers, according to the World Health Organization and other reports, about 10% of the world's population make up individuals with persons with disability.
Well, you see, we're living particularly in a country where three major problems hold us back. We have religion, we have tradition, and then we also have other beliefs. So there's also a large amount of ignorance. You see, what you don't know, you fear. And when religion or traditional institutions now attach something to it, that it's either diabolical or evil, then people get afraid. And so that's what you find with a lot of conditions that look a little bit different. For instance, the child being born with missing limbs. Even if you remember, before Melis Lester's time in the East, in the Calabar, southeast part of this country, even having multiple births was seen as weird.
Exactly.
Okay, and so it is these beliefs that we're having to deal with in our society. And some of these conditions come with maybe seizures, they come with children drooling, and especially if the parents have not been properly informed and are not taking adequate care of these children, then you also have the issue of maybe they may not be that sightly. So the end result is that society shrinks back. You think it's contagious. You think it can be hereditary or passed down. So a father who's doing well has a child that has some kind of disability, hides the child because the society may say, okay, he has used that child's head for the money. That's why he has money. Another person may feel that it's a sign of a failure on his part. And so he doesn't want people to know that he has a child like that. And so you have lots of highly placed people in our society who either hide the child or send the child abroad because they just can't live with society, identifying them with that. So these are the multiple things that we're having to deal with in our society that has caused stigma, that's caused fear, that's caused a lot of problems.
Not to belabor this, but I'll come to you, David, because you're the convener of the Coalition of Disability Organization. You deal with lots of people with disability. Can you give us an idea of how it is to exist in a country where stigma is the norm among people towards people with disability?
Yeah, I'm a person with disability. So when we discuss issue of stigma, discrimination, I would like, personal experience. I was not born with disability. I lost my two hands in Freetown, Sierra Leone 20 years ago. That was January 1999.
Where exactly? I didn't get that.
In Freetown, Sierra Leone.
Freetown, okay.
January 1999. And when I came back to Nigeria, by special grace of God, I was evacuated by the Nigerian contingent of ECOMOG. I was flown back. I was treated at military hospital, Yaba. After my discharge, a signal was given to my state government to take care of my rehabilitation. The then civilian governor, Chief Joseph Carlo. guess what? The state denied me rehabilitation. I moved to Abuja to request for rehabilitation, acknowledging that it is Nigerian exuberance in Freetown that led to my limb loss. And the state denied me rehabilitation. The stigma and discrimination we suffer in this country is being propelled by the state due to their irresponsibility.
What was the excuse, if I may ask?
The excuse is just they don't want to see people with disabilities. They classify you as a troublemaker. They classify you as someone who is not supposed to come out. So, by reason of that behavior, the state is in the forefront of promoting stigma, discrimination, and other harmful practices. Then you come to the community, just as he rightly said, the society sees you as a result of the sin you commit. Even as at day before yesterday, I was sharing my testimony on the 20 years anniversary of my limb loss. And someone also mentioned that you are not saying what you committed in Sierra Leone. Somebody said it to me. Yeah. So somebody said, I was on my Facebook wall. I had about, over 550 comments. And I was going through it, and somebody said, you've not, and one guy challenged him, said, we know him, we know what happened. So even the then Minister for Sports and Social Development, who I approach, Mr. Demishi Sango, I approached him for support. He told me, David, you committed crime in Sierra Leone. That was why your 2 limbs were chopped off. I had to bring up my medical report from General Remu and present it to him. I said, sir, this is my medical report.
That must have been traumatic for you.
So I experienced it. Tim Minakaya, who was then Minister for Health, also exhibited, stigma, discrimination to me. So when we talk about people who exhibit this behavior that undermines and hinder people with disabilities, there are people in high places in this country.
Could that be why the disability bill is still pending, do you think?
No, it has been signed yesterday.
Okay,
yes.
yes.
The president signed it yesterday. It is because of this ignorance. There are people who feed fat from what we call charity-based approach of addressing disability. So, because they feed fat from it, they won't like a social, model approach or right-based approach of addressing disability. So, they will struggle to undermine, coupled with the then Minister of Women Affairs, whose, intention towards that bill was not good for us. So, they were the people that killed it at the initial time. That is in 2011 and 2015. But this current Minister of Women Affairs graciously are in tune with the UN Convention on Persons with Disabilities. Okay,
but the length of time, the back and forth before the fight was won, did we have to go through all that?
Yeah, we're not supposed to go through it if we are in a society that value human lives. If we're in a society that believes that all lives are precious. So, in as much as the state does not believe that all lives are precious, so you continue to struggle in this matter. We are so honored that His Excellency, President Muhammad Buhari, during his campaign in 2015 as APC presidential candidate, in Lafia, Nasarawa State, March 21st, 2018, promised that if he gets to power, that he's going to work with National Assembly to sign a disability, act for us. And that was the key message we used to engage him, all this while, we agitated for this. Because as of last week, everybody heard that the president said he was not aware. And I insisted that the bill was transmitted on the 18th of December 2018. And people said, oh, David, you're not correct. I said, I'm correct. And before you know it, the documents start coming out. Today, we celebrate.
Sure.
We celebrate, this, the reign of a law or an act that protects all, irrespective of ability or disability.
It's definitely a new dawn. But one of the responses that we've also gotten is that certain conditions are heightened when we don't have sound healthcare system or sound educational system to be able to respond to these issues. Now, in our healthcare facilities, there are some cases whereby persons who would still be walking on their 2 legs are now in wheelchairs. There are cases whereby people who fireburn instances who are not supposed to be walking around with scars or go blind or lose their ears and all of those have lost those because our response has also been pretty poor when it comes to attending to accidents and near fatal incidences. What's also your thoughts on that as well? Our response as a nation.
Yeah, you see, just as we say we are a developing country, and when we don't have, qualified people heading institutions, we continue to run into this kind of crisis. When corruption is the order of the day, when process of recruitment and hiring of people is being undermined by reason of tribe or religion, you continue to have this kind of issue. The reason is simple. As I said earlier, in other crime, all lives are precious, and the state is held responsible to ensure that all lives are protected. Where people cannot hold the state responsible, all this gap will continue to occur, be it from the emergency response team or the fire brigade, group, or by traffic warders who are supposed to do the needful, or individuals supposed to do the good construction of our roads. In as much as corruption is pervasive in the society, this kind of situation will continue to increase. As I always tell people, that today, one of the greatest drivers of disability is corruption. Corruption breeds poverty, and poverty breeds disability. So they form multiple vicious circles, continue to put us in the way we find ourselves.
Let's come back to you, Femi. In Nigeria, we're told that it is not the lack of laws, but the willpower to implement laws. Now, the disability bill is just a day old. Are we going forward?
Well, the good thing is that the bill's come out, and it's come out with also the establishment of an office to implement it. It says that the office will be manned by an executive secretary. So that is another major thing, because an enabling environment must be created. And then we must also create policies to make sure they work. A lot of things have been spelled about charges of people who don't do their job, ensuring that there's access, ensuring that transportation is there and all, and even giving 5-year moratorium to public buildings to make sure they're accessible. But you must now bring in the enforcing tools to make sure that people can go around and hold them responsible that all these things are put in place. We've had a lot of laws. I'll tell you, like for instance, they will tell you in the medical bills, it says that children under 5 are entitled to free medical care. Go to any healthcare center and all. Then the people will ask you, who's going to pay? Because you've set up a law, but you've not put the funding there. You also have not trained, like he said about, why we have so many disabled people in our country. It's because the medical facilities, healthcare generally has not been given the right attention. We have some brilliant doctors in this country, but most of them will tell you that they don't have the enabling tools. The equipment is either not there, or power. You're doing major surgery with, touchlight or
sometimes there's no oxygen at all.
So you find when you see a doctor who is demoralized, overwhelmed by his inability to do what he knows he can do, it's sad. And so there is a lot that must be done.
Now, Femi, away from the healthcare sector, we also have to look at education as well. When we talk about inclusion, education forms the bedrock for human development. At the end of the day, we always see we have special schools for people with disabilities. Now, in Nigeria, we only have about 3-4 higher institutions where we have for people with disabilities. And another cause that people are pushing is that we even have to have a mainstream education system, right from basic, senior and junior high school to tertiary levels, where we have people with disabilities or with special needs being incorporated in the curriculum and then in the plan of the education process. Your response?
Well, you remember I told you about lack of knowledge being a major problem. Education solves a lot of problems. It opens doors. Many people who see themselves as disabled, if they can be empowered, would be able. Differently able, but they'll be able. Many of them will be able to earn income. I'll tell you, that woman with twins in the market begging for money, those children are the income earners for the family. And it's just that it's not properly structured. If it's properly structured, they'll even earn more money. So what are we talking about? Now people are talking about inclusion. But inclusion is something we must get clearly. Inclusion is about getting somebody who has proven that, a child that has proven that they have reached a level of independence living, maybe toileting and all that, and also intellectual ability to cope in a normal class. Then we put, if they are not at that level, that child will be bullied and that child will not learn. Now, then we also have to look at the rest of the students. Are they ready to take in somebody who looks different? We have to look at the parents. Are the parents ready to have their child in a school or in a classroom with a child that is different? So there's a lot of advocacy, a lot of things that need to be done to change the mindset that we're talking in this country. The teachers also, not every teacher can be a special needs teacher, but we can train every teacher to identify a child that appears to need some extra help, so that that child, instead of being left behind, is put forward. If you go to some of our private public schools, that child that's not doing well, instead of being put in front, is actually pushed to the back of the school, to the classroom. So these are problems that we need to resolve. Special schools, sorry. Okay. You know, we have a few special schools scattered around the country, but things have gone beyond that. Because unless person needs, you know, vocational skills, if it's because of intellectual capacity, then, you know, there are different schools now that, you know, what you need for autism or Down syndrome or autism, etc., are different. So outside this country, the move is away from one sack for all the children. And luckily, there are private schools that are beginning to address these things in Nigeria.
Wow, there's so much more we'd like to ask, but then we have to round off this segment. We want to thank you so much, David Anyaele, convener, Coalition of Disability Organization. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And we also want to thank you as well, Femi Gbadebo, founder, Benola Cerebral Palsy Initiative. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Well, it's been insightful. If anyone, and
absolutely.
The conversation will definitely continue. We're paying a special focus to persons with disabilities, and we still have a larger scope to delve into. Don't go anywhere.